Eric Ross Weinstein is the managing director of Peter Thiel's personal investment firm and graduated from Harvard with a PhD in mathematical physics. Quite impressive, but hardly special enough to appear on my glorious channel. Or so it seems. Eric caught the public's eye on various guest appearances and then used his brother Brad as a gateway to jumpstart his career. And Joe Rogan turned out to become the alpha and the omega of Eric Weinstein. Even though Eric aligned himself on the left at first, Joe quickly noticed that this guy is his favorite type of guest. Sure, he acknowledged oppression of intersex people, perceived Trump as an immediate danger, but Eric was also kind of fed up with the modern regressive left and accordingly resorted to standard liberal centrist straw-man-y talking points.
I don't think that activism makes for good advancement. Is this new thing, which is that all imbalances are all structural oppression. I have more in common with a country club Republican than somebody who's got a bike lock who's looking for trouble in a street demonstration trying to smash up a Starbucks.
However, being discount Jordan Peterson barely makes for an interesting persona, which is why Eric's amazing intelligence became his unique selling point. Even though he had no clue what Eric was saying, Rogan was captivated by his expertise and gargantuan vocabulary about all the magic the natural sciences have to offer.
HOPF.
What the fuck am I looking at?
You are looking at the most important object in the universe.
What?
If we could bring up the wiring diagram or adjacency matrix. Yeah, the C. elegans wiring diagram.
Whoa.
That is a complete map of the 300 neurons in the C. elegans worm. That is a map of the mind of the worm.
Wow. What in
Right.
the fuck am I looking at?
I love when you say that.
That is so wild.
Yeah.
Now you might ask, huh? Presenting 49-dimensional models to Bro Jogan entitles you to be the IDW's ultimate egghead? Well, you underestimated Eric's genius. He has discovered portals.
No, I really think in many ways I've left this planet. I think that there's a way in which I've checked out. If I'm in a stimulating conversation, I'm very present. If I'm in an unstimulating conversation, I have to make my own fun. At times, I'll just make up a story and see how it flies. When I was a kid, I read all of these stories, and I called it the portal story. And it was always the same. Somebody is trapped in a humdrum existence in an ordinary world. They're around normies. They find the portal, and the portal becomes the call to adventure. And they spend time in the alternate universe.
Luckily, Eric found a way to let us ordinary beings take the enter the portal. A podcast in which he hosted a wide range of guests, from your basic go-to to actual geniuses. Unfortunately, as time went on, the portal drifted more and more into the territory of conspiracy theories, a cornerstone being episode 25, in which Eric describes a meeting with Jeffrey Epstein.
What I'm going to say about Jeffrey Epstein is that if the official story isn't true, and that in fact he was an intelligence community construct, either US or foreign, then he was a very poor intelligence construct. He was not well constructed. You drew up this person, whoever you may be, and you made a mistake. I went to see him on 71st Street across from the Frick Museum. I sat in the chair for a while and I noticed that there was a large mechanical piece of art, and I believe that it had some electronics to it. After a while of sitting in my chair, my recollection is that I went up to this art object and I started trying to inspect it. I suddenly thought that I saw something like a lipstick camera. My first thought was, holy cow, I've discovered that there's a hidden camera that has been trained on me while I've been in this room. But my second thought was exactly the reverse of this. The object that it was buried in attracts attention, and it must be that people who look at this object invariably find the camera. And then I started asking myself, am I supposed to find the camera? Is this a test? Is this person trying to make sure I'm comfortable with being under surveillance?
Eric's weird perception of the Epstein incident is illustrative of his mindset. Nothing is what it seems. You can't trust anything or anyone unless you wake up and enter the portal.
If you look at a wall How do you know that the wall doesn't have a door? How do you know that there isn't a panic room behind the bookcase if you just pull out the right book? We learn to stop looking for the portal.
Eric admits his obsession, and actually seems cutely misguided. But Jeffrey Epstein was not an actor. And I know there isn't a panic room in my house. I have spatial awareness, and I can read a floor plan. What is more, Eric's conspiracy stories all too often paint him and his IDW lot as victims of the elites, the institutions, and the tech giants. A great example for the persecution complex is Eric's claim that the term fake news was artificially created and propagated in the mainstream media as a tool to assume control over the political conversation and to seek and destroy unorthodox views. You know, the kind of insight you only gain by entering the portal. Eric's brain farts in this regard were covered extensively on the excellent Decoding the Gurus podcast, hosted by Chris Kavanagh and Matt Brown, who came to the conclusion that
it's impossible to exaggerate the level of self-aggrandizing that the two Weinstein brothers display. It's impossible to parody.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you know, we don't want to rehash all the stuff we covered, but just this idea that following the election of Trump, there was this secret meeting of these shadowy organizations who then invented the fake news meme as a smokescreen to suppress brave voices of unity like his to save America. Ugh, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just so annoying.
Still, Eric has amassed an enormous number of zealots who hail his high-level ideas and his unconventional reasoning. But what makes him so fascinating? On the one hand, the distrust in authority and conventional media and science is appealing to lots of critical thinkers who desire to be special and to stick out from all the sheeple that believe in vaccinations and, you know, anthropomorphic climate change. In Weinstein's community, they get a sense of belonging and feel more confident in their views as they are guarded by an imposing public intellectual. On the other hand, there's Eric's choice of words and manner of speaking. He is notorious for pulling any kinds of composition out of his ass.
I define this thing called an ego, or an embedded growth obligation. Because this is one of the tricks inside of what I've called the gated institutional narrative, or the GIN. Seriously, you're just showing a part of what I'm calling the DISC, the Distributed Idea Suppression Complex.
The use of these acronyms adds to Eric's agenda. He creates lexical barriers, which his devoted fans are immediately able to overcome. Those who understand his verbiage feel smart and validated. Weinstein also appears quite smart himself, since he's able to categorize complex concepts and to boil them down. And, of course, DISC sounds a lot less wacky than the usual conspiracy vocabulary. In reality, though, these terms add nothing to our comprehension at all. It feels like a pathetic attempt to cement his legacy in the annals of popular internet culture. I mean, Eric coined the term intellectual dark web, so he was successful in this regard. To further illustrate his points, Eric creates new words, like knark, but most notably also draws obscure analogies and invokes metaphors from music, politics, mathematics, and professional wrestling?
But kayfabe is the organized structure of lies that undergirds professional wrestling and has kept it as a simulated sport for about a century. The rebel end of corporate, because these corporations are starting to realize that their need for kayfabe is just far exceeding.
Kayfabe?
Kayfabe. Kayfabe is carnival speak for the word fake. And when catch wrestling devolved into professional wrestling...
You know about all that?
The smugness clearly indicates Weinstein's wish to create the image of the omniscient Renaissance man. In reality, it's nothing but self-indulgence. Here's a response to Sam Harris, who basically claimed that Donald Trump's tweets are idiotic.
I think you get Trump wrong. I think that you were slow to give him his due. I mean, of course, as you know, I wrote this essay on kayfabe,
Right.
Anticipating that professional wrestling was going to turn out to be incredibly important And in fact, I thought it was going to determine the presidency. That was a understanding how lies play within the mind and how hypocrisy works, and a concept called namespaces out of Python programming and the like, how we compartmentalize. I'd seen these other candidacies in other countries in which people seem not to be able to distinguish an actor from the character that they played, and whatnot. And so I believed that the system of lies within professional wrestling told us what was possible. And Trump actually sort of came out of the WWE through his association with the McMahon family. Yeah. And I believe that he actually understood deep things that psychology departments will wake up to 20 years from now.
You can clearly see that his argument is simple as fuck and can be expressed without confusing, illogical analogies. Ironically, the references and their explanations are a lot more complicated than the original point and actually worsen the listener's understanding. Eric uses as many words as possible and ultimately says very little. But let's not forget that the English language is not Eric Weinstein's strongest suit. He's a man of the hard sciences, and this is where he truly shines. Right? When Eric announced the portal on Joe Rogan, he explained the podcast's purpose. You see, Eric has a dire outlook about humanity on this planet. We will not survive as a species, unless...
as if we can break the Einsteinian speed limit, so far as I know. What I've been toying with since I was 19 was, what is the theory beyond Einstein? And so I started working on a different idea to unify the two branches of physics. What is my responsibility in terms of the portal? What I'm going to try to do with this podcast is gain the courage to share whatever ideas I've had about breaking the speed limit.
Eric wants to prove Einstein wrong and save humanity. Let that sink in. Imagine you were capable to cause a gigantic paradigm shift in physics. What would you do? And if your answer was make it public, become rich and famous, you'd be correct. That's the path that Eric took in 2013. However, instead of writing a concise paper, he chose to hold lectures at Oxford University. Weinstein was invited by Marcus de Sautoy, a fellow mathematician and old acquaintance of his, and presented his revolutionary theory.
So it's now time to trade the family cow for the magic beans and bring them home.
I watched 30 minutes of the talk and could not follow at all. But I've never been a math guy, so who am I to judge, right? What's more important is how the scientific community reacted to Eric's groundbreaking ideas.
I gave these lectures in 2013, in May of 2013 in Oxford, and I was appalled by the way in which the world's physics community responded.
Now, what was the response to the from the physicists that you found appalling?
Well, there were two articles that appeared in the Guardian newspaper or website that talked breathlessly about what I had done or what I might have done.
Well, those articles seem convincing, but let's have a closer look. Note that the first piece is an op-ed written by de Sautoy, who hosted the lectures himself, which indicates a teeny tiny conflict of interest, but we'll let it slide. Despite the title, the second article does not laud Eric at all. The author merely quotes scientists who consider his ideas and approach to science noteworthy, but also includes critical voices, and concludes that until Weinstein produces a paper, physicists will remain unconvinced and, crucially, unable to properly assess the claims he's making. All in all, the scientific community either didn't pay attention to or completely dismissed Eric's theory. Jennifer Ouellette sums it up quite nicely. You've got a guy who's been out of the field for 20 years, but still doing some dabbling on the side, who has an intriguing new idea that a couple of math professors think is promising. So he got invited to give a colloquium at Oxford by his old grad school buddy. And there's no technical paper yet, not even a rough draft on the archive. So his ideas can't even be appropriately evaluated by actual working physicists. How exactly does that qualify as newsworthy? Good point, Jen. So why hasn't Eric written a paper if it's the standard procedure in science?
The community settled on a rubric, which is paper or it didn't happen. In other words, put up or shut up, give us a paper. Now, I had written something, but because my trajectory through math and physics was very unusual, I have a very low trust of the academic community.
While peer review certainly has its flaws, it's the best we've got to determine scientific consensus and to weed out irrelevant contributions. It's the only way to get a paper scrutinized and verified. Scientific advancement is collaborative in nature, which can only function with competing views. And this is basically an unwritten rule, at least outside of the portal.
I had broken the rules.
The rules.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the academic cabal disc and their stupid rules, the Weinstein Trophy Room would be full of silverware.
It is time to do battle with the oppressive structures that have been used to silence new ideas. If in my family I assert that there might be as many as 3 revolutionary Nobel quality ideas in one clutch, how many ideas might there be suppressed if that is actually true?
The delusion is off the charts here. Eric's ego is untamable, and his self-righteous narcissism evaporates through every pore of his body. For men like him, being an ordinary person, like you and me, is not an option, even though there's little to none evidence that Eric, or Brett for that matter, are anything but average. Nobody in their respective fields gives a fuck about them, and the only gateways to promote themselves and their contrafactual theories are Twitter and YouTube. Science does not happen here, but at least they have thousands of lemmings who hate the mainstream as much as they do. And if Eric claims he can overthrow Einstein, they follow him.
You're supposed to submit a paper. The paper's supposed to be reviewed. It's supposed to appear in a journal. You're not supposed to be doing this from mathematics. You don't have training as a physicist. This is a hoax.
But it's not a hoax.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if it is a hoax, it's on me.
It's clearly not a hoax. You're not hoaxing anyone.
But Joe, how do you know that? It's obvious that at the time of this interview, July 2019, Rogan was still under the impression that Hipster Gargamel was actually legit. Eric would not appear on JRE again until April 2021. And this is when Joe gave him the death blow. In the beginning, it was just a casual conversation on music, and Eric talked a bit about his guitar skills.
I put a brief clip of myself playing on Instagram, and I got contacted by like some of the greatest guitarists in the effing world.
Joe then asked the simple question.
I don't know what I'm doing. And
how'd you learn how to do this?
I hang out in a room alone. It's sort of dark and lonely. But
really?
Yeah.
When did you learn this?
This is part of the thing. I do a bunch of things that I don't do with other people, right? I just learn shit on my own.
But when did you learn this? How long ago?
I don't even know. Some of it in the last year.
But when did you start playing guitar? You're being coy.
No, I've had a guitar.
I don't like it. I'm going to call you out on this. I don't like it. Very uncomfortable.
I've had a guitar since I was. Go after yourself. I had a guitar since I was 15, but I don't know when.
Okay,
yeah.
You've been playing forever, but you're self-taught.
Classic Eric. Just like you and me, he had learned an instrument when he was little. But even this simple bit of information has to be wrapped in confusing elaborations. Otherwise, it just wouldn't be extraordinary. But let's get to the climax of the show. Eric revealed geometric unity. Imagine that. Joe Rogan's audience was about to find out how Einstein was dethroned. Unfortunately, the presentation was a huge disaster. In preparation for the podcast, Eric had hosted a few videos that illustrate the gist of his theory on a website called
PullThatUpJamie.com.
The exact phrase Rogan uses to tell his assistant to open a certain website.
Try PullThatUpJamie.com. Okay.
Collection of videos in support of geometric unity.
Epic troll.
I guess this was supposed to be a reference or a tribute to Joe, suggesting that Eric was gentle enough to pick his platform to present geometric unity. But his smugness was about to change.
There it is. Pull that up. I'm a little conflicted with that. Are you?
Well, we can talk afterwards.
You should have thought of it first, Jamie.
Jamie's he's got a.
Can you be any less self-aware? Whatever. Let's focus on the math. Weinstein took the chance to replace Einstein on JRE by presenting his thoughts to the audience. However, Joe didn't react as expected.
I want you to boil this down so that someone who doesn't understand physics at all
Great.
will understand this in a way that they could maybe even explain to someone else.
So Eric refers to the videos on the aforementioned website to clarify his gibberish.
If you do the smaller neck, like we had a huge bottle to get it into metrics. There's another space.
People are listening to this, you know. They're
Okay.
they're not just seeing it. Very few people are seeing it.
Well-
maybe like 30%.
Okay. If
This
that's-
is a problem.
Yeah.
This conversation's a problem. Because people are going to have to... people are tuning out right now.
Okay,
Guaranteed.
on this
I don't
show.
know what that means. The light comes from seeing the world, having a water
On
wiggle
those-
structure on top of it.
that you can rotate these, right? If I squish a water wiggle and it goes
Okay.
around,
Yes.
that is called a G action.
I don't know what the fuck you just said. How about that?
Okay.
Do
well,
you? Do you know what he said?
They
Well,
need
it's
to
very complicated, and even the way you're explaining it to me is not resonating.
Well, if I can show it to you on a video, but I don't want to ruin the show. So the part of the problem is.
But I'm not sure that the video would even show it. Do you understand what he's saying? But I
Legit-
want you to boil
Yep.
this down. You're not boiling it down at all.
If you go to pull that up, Jamie Duck, look, there's no way in which I can talk about tensor analysis, curvature tensors, the theory of everything.
Oh, really, Eric? An MMA stoner podcast with Elkmeat Andy is not the platform to change the paradigm of physics? Well, why didn't you present it to well-versed professionals that might actually comprehend what the fuck you're blabbering on about? Nah. Let's hand the host some hedge clippers and a floppy dildo. That'll show him.
But remember the time I showed you the hop vibration and you're like, what the fuck is that?
I'm sorry, but these times are over. Rogan clearly realized he advanced the career of a charlatan and got tired of Eric, as well as other celebrities from his bubble, by the way. Comedian Tim Dillon had put it like this.
Everyone goes, Eric Weinstein's a genie. Does anyone know why? What? Is there anything they've done? No, truly, because all they do is talk. Is there anything they've built? Is there one appliance that they have anything to do with? Have they come up with something even like the Rotato? Is there one thing any of them have done except whack off Elon Musk and talk?
And this caused Eric to throw a tantrum on Rogan.
I was, you know this question, like, what has Eric Weinstein ever done? I did that. I did the marginal revolution using gauge theory.
Stop. That question is Tim Dillon joking around.
Yeah, I know.
He said, "What did he never created the
Actually,
Rotato? He was
that was
just
very fun.
joking. He was fucking around."
That was the funny part about it. He was joking.
But he's saying that because he knows you're brilliant.
I
Do you
love
understand?
him
The
too.
only reason why he can say that, if
Joe,
you were a loser,
Joe,
he couldn't say
Joe,
that.
you don't need to make me feel good about myself.
I know, but you brought it up again.
No, I'm saying something completely different.
Okay.
Okay. No.
You're in a weird world. Okay, here's your weird world. You're in a world of serious intellectual people. But
You're
hanging
damn
out with,
straight.
You're also hanging out with Tim Dillon and me.
And I love it.
But but the problem is, like, you're conflating these two
Joe,
things.
no.
Weinstein clearly knows his time at the cool kids table is coming to a close. He's a giant dork that weaseled his way into an environment he doesn't fully understand. He is obsessed with creating a big public image, but, and I repeat myself here, Eric Weinstein is small potatoes. He's nothing special. After a meltdown like this, you and I would probably avoid the internet for a long, long time. But Eric wasn't finished with constructing his legacy yet. But too bad it turned out that his paper was complete dogshit. Not only did he release it on April Fools, in the introduction it says that the author is not a physicist, no longer an active academician, but an entertainer and host of the Portal podcast. Jesus Christ. This work of entertainment is a draft, which is the property of the author and may not be built upon. I'm just a liberal arts moron, but is this really how real science works? It's clear the paper aims at convincing his Portal lemmings that there's something of value behind all the complex math, but even they are growing suspicious. Because Eric's paper hasn't revolutionized physics. So what's going on here? Is Einstein still relevant? Tim Nguyen and a user called Theopolia had uploaded a response to geometric unity even before the final paper was released on April 1st, and pointed out lots of flaws, which were already apparent in the presentation Eric gave at the university. Weinstein's final version, then, did not fix those problems at all. So, of course, Eric was confronted with the shortcomings by lots of people on Twitter, Clubhouse, and his Discord group. He had two choices: admitting the flaws and concede, or refusing to engage with the criticism. Guess what he went for?
Private or public, I haven't heard of any way of coming back and arguing against their critique.
No, you're not understanding me. I'm not putting up with misogyny.
I'm talking about the math,
I'm not
Eric.
putting up, I'm not putting up with threats against my family. I'm not putting up with any of the stupid shit that server engages in. Capiche?
Great.
Am I clear?
Agree, Eric. I agree. You should not be subjected to any character assassination. You should not be subjected to threats. That's bullshit. I think we can all agree with that. I'm talking strictly about the mathematics.
No, I'm talking strictly, and I said something to you. Rape jokes aren't funny. Are we clear?
Who thinks they're funny? I agree.
That server.
Eric deflects Nguyen's and Polya's criticism by referring to some obscure jokes made by anonymous trolls in some Discord server, as if they represented the authors. Oh, a little side note. This is the woman Eric Strawman White Knights for.
Well, first, maybe let me make a comment about what Eric just said. You complained that there hasn't been any substantive discussion about geometric unity. I think that's because no one has any idea what you're talking about in the first place. I think you're severely underestimating the communication problem, and you have to work much, much harder on that. Your video, I'm probably one of those who have a pretty good starting point in understanding what you're even talking about, and even I only have a very vague idea.
Ironically, Eric also refused to take the paper seriously, because one of the authors uses a pseudonym.
Sorry, who's Theo?
Timothy and Theo, they put out the retort to...
Sorry, who's Theo?
Theo Polya and Timothy.
Yeah, I'm not aware of Theo Polya. Where did
we don't know who he is? Yeah, we have
who's
to know
Theo Polya?
Do you know who Timothy Wynn is?
Let's talk about Theo Polya. Who's Theo Polya?
He's the co-author from the paper.
Who is he?
Timothy Wynn.
Yeah, who is he? I don't know.
That wasn't the question, though,
no,
right?
That is the question.
No, the question was...
No, that is the question. No, you're not understanding. No, you're not understanding me. I've never heard in the history of physics anybody expecting to be taken seriously as an anonymous critic.
But Eric, you were the one who claimed that institutions and credentials are irrelevant as long as the subject matter is adequate. What a baby. At this point, the purpose of his peer correction shtick is obvious. He wants to cover his own ass and found some useful idiots in the IDW sphere who believe his word salads anyway, since they don't know anything about physics. And Christ, there are bizarre stories about his Discord server. There's a Decoding the Gurus episode with an insider who goes by Bad Stats on Twitter, and I would strongly recommend to check it out, and also follow him. There's lots of hilarious Weinstein content up there. So, what's Eric been up to since that gigantic farce? The Portal podcast is on hiatus at this moment, because he would be forced to address the controversy. The official reason being that Eric attempts to take legal action against harassers? In other news, he dipped his toe into UFO territory, is endorsing right-wing public intellectuals, and increasingly adapts their talking points, etc., etc. And he could have ended the pandemic.
There were plenty of things that we could do with honorable people that we cannot do with current leadership. You have people who belong in chairs that would allow them to be more measured, more careful, to command more resources, sitting in podcasting studios. I know what to do to build leadership. I know what I would do if I were a member of the establishment in terms of sitting in a seat at an institution. I know what to do as a wartime general.
The thing is, all of that is so boring. Prime Eric Weinstein is over. He was dragged out of his fantasy in which long-form podcasts changed the world, and is now left with a bunch of fear-mongering Twitter morons and a lunch lady haircut. He will never ever be a big deal. Yo, I'm glad you've made it until the end. If you enjoyed my content, then of course watch the other videos and also click that subscribe button. And I'll see you next time. Bye.